Let's continue talking about important trends and typologies of these mass murderers. The next point here, again, I'm doing a little bit of pushing back with the author. Again, I think probably one difference between the two of us is sort of my background as a criminologist, and she's kind of coming at it from a different perspective. But again, there's a lot that she's offering that is accurate, but I just have to push back where I think is necessary. And the one place where the author is correct, as I see it, is that a higher percentage of these mass killings now involve AR-15 style rifles that are semi-automatic. The main thing is that they're semi-automatic, that they shoot high velocity rounds, and so they can do a lot of damage, like rifles can. Rifles shoot their rounds at higher velocity, and so that can do more damage to the target. And they're more accurate. They can shoot more accurately than a handgun. The handguns are semi-automatic, so they're fast, and you can get big clips on handguns too. So you can put a lot of rounds in the air. But they're semi-automatic, so they're similar that way. They're less accurate than a rifle is. So there's certain characteristics of rifles that are conducive to mass shootings, and so they've become really sort of the weapon of choice of these mass killers, more so than in the past, where handguns, semi-automatic handguns, were more popular in the past. So now these semi-automatic rifles have become very popular, common among these killers. So the author's right about that. But she again claims that it's minorities that are targeted. High-profile cases, yes. Media cases, yes. Generally speaking, it's just not the case unless if she's talking, again, I don't know if she's shifting in who she's focusing on. If she's talking about the family killings and she's talking about gang killings, yes, the majority of your victims are going to be non-white. The victims are very often poor minority individuals in these family attacks or in these gang attacks. But so are the perpetrators. The perpetrators are usually the same race and same ethnicity. Not always, but generally speaking. So when she's talking about minorities targeted, it's not a racial thing. If you have one black gang attacking another black gang and shooting up some party and injuring and killing a bunch of people, that's not a racial thing, it's a gang thing. So I'm not sure exactly what she's talking about, but she's probably talking about these exceptional small number of cases, high-profile cases, which often do have this ideological element or racial element, the ones that get so much popular media attention. There's evidence that the number of deaths per incident has also been increasing. So they've gotten the incidents have gotten more deadly, more victims, more injuries, more deaths. And again, I talked before about the reasons for this are sort of potentially complicated. But, one common argument that's made among criminologists, people who study these mass killings, is that as these killers have switched to these semi-automatic rifles, AR-15 style semi-automatic rifles, as their gun of choice, it could be that those guns with their high velocity, with their large magazines, that they're able to do their accuracy, their high level of accuracy, that they're able to do more damage, more injury, more victims because of the technology of the gun. That's certainly a possibility. Again, I don't think it's proven. I don't think that's really been demonstrated, but it's definitely a leading hypothesis of why is it that we're seeing bigger events with more injuries, more deaths. It's potentially at least a one factor about what's going on here. As in so many areas of social life, mass shooters have been increasing their use of social media. Social media is an important factor here. A lot of things, information is gathered through social media. A lot of these killers actually are sort of tipping off, if we were paying attention, tipping off people, warning people, letting people know about their future crimes, their planned crimes. But definitely, it's in so many, as it is in so many areas of life nowadays, social media is increasingly important. And it's more important for these killers. Research has found a tendency for school shooters to have, number one, grievances, number two, a desire to kill, three, suicidality, meaning a proneness or maybe a desire to kill yourself, four, a desire for fame, and five, a desire to exceed the deaths of previous killers. And I want to stress five because that's one that hasn't always gotten a lot of attention. You see that with a lot of violent individuals, that they want to outdo each other. They want to be the bigger monster, the more famous killer, that sort of stuff. So that one I want to stress because it's kind of been underemphasized in the past. School shooters have been categorized into three types. Secondary school, so we're talking, really high school or perhaps middle school shooters, college, university shooters, and aberrant adults. It's basically an other category where you're, again, it's I would call it an other category. That's probably the simplest way to put it. Now, but they then break down two major profiles within each one of these three categories of types of school shooters. One is psychotic, where, okay, we're talking school shooters now. This sort of psychotic person often suffers from a disconnection from reality. They have delusions, which means they sort of have beliefs that are just out of touch with reality. They might have hallucinations where they hear or see things that aren't really there. And they might be, those are symptoms of someone who might be schizophrenic, have a mental illness diagnosis or maybe undiagnosed. Schizophrenics have high rates of violence, several times that of the general population. So this is one risk factor for violent behavior, would be if you're suffering from this particular mental disorder. Now, that certainly doesn't mean that every person who has this who suffers from this form of mental disorder is a violent person. That's not the case at all. But we're talking about correlations. We're talking about tendencies. And folks suffering from this do have a higher rate of committing acts of violence than the general population. Number two, the second sort of in addition to the psychotic or person who has these sort of mental challenges, mental issues, is a traumatized person. So it's a related thing, because here we're talking somebody about who's maybe doesn't have a mental illness, but they have psychological issues due to childhood abuse, due to being bullied a lot by peers, so a victim of bullying, experiencing various types of trauma, really difficult, stressful, painful events that can scar an individual and can lead to sort of feelings of desire for retaliation, for revenge, for payback against those, or against those who have hurt you or who have bullied you, or just a desire to take it out on somebody else, to give to somebody else what's been given to you, type of thing. Again, there's a lot of revenge driving these crimes, a desire for other people to hurt like you've been hurting, that sort of thing. Now, the Violence Project has it. So this is another typology that the author mentions that's put together by the Violence Project. And again, this sample that they base their conclusions on is again focused on high-profile cases, not the smaller, less publicized cases, which tend to be more common. They look at the less common, high-profile cases that have got a lot of media attention, and that gives a little bit of a distorted picture because the media isn't selecting a random sample of cases. They're picking those that interest the media, that are going to get a lot of public attention and drive ratings and make profits for these media companies, right? So that's not what we're about as criminologists. Is we're trying to look at the general phenomenon with hard data, right? So I think that's a little bit of I would say, is a weakness of this Violence Project, has been this a tendency to focus on more high-profile cases. The number one category of their typology is a K through 12 school shooter. So there's going to be some overlap with the typology we just went over. K through 12 shooter, the majority are male and white, and they are students or ex-students, and they often have a history of trauma. They are usually suicidal, and they do not fit the profile of the street criminal. These are kids who are flying under the radar. They may not have discipline problems. They might be decent, good students, possibly in school. They may not be poor. They might be middle class individuals. They're really not on the radar. They haven't necessarily been arrested a lot by law enforcement. They don't fit the profile of, say, a kid on the street who's gotten in trouble with law enforcement and has been involved in different types of street crime, that sort of thing. This is a very different profile from that. Again, more middle class, and more people don't think that the kid is a delinquent or, involved in serious criminality. These shooters often leak their plans before attack. That's actually a place where I think we can work on prevention and stopping these crimes before occurring, is developing better ways to get information when these individuals are talking about their plans before the attack. And these guys plan carefully, so they take their time and they plan. So if they're talking about it beforehand, there's usually going to be time to stop them. And guns, where these guys are usually getting their guns from is legally, not off the street, not in a black market, illegal way. They're getting them from family usually, and those guns have been obtained legally, or they might be old enough they might be able to get the guns themselves legally because they don't have a criminal history. Again, they don't have that profile of a person with a long rap sheet who can't get a gun legally. They are able to get the guns legally because they have no official criminal violent history. Number two, college, university shooters, racially diverse, most are students, history of mental illness, schizophrenia, suicidal, leave manifestos, obtain guns legally. So this is, again, some similarities here with what you see with the K through 12 shooters. And again, you see quite a diversity racially. You don't want to over generalize and say all these shooters are all white, because that can lead to problems when you overgeneralize like that and stereotype. We saw with the DC snipers, Washington DC snipers, that there were experts, so-called experts, who were using typologies who said these guys are white guys who were shooting up, individuals in neighborhoods across in the DC area. And that was not the case. These were African American individuals, an older guy and a younger teenage individual, who were committing these crimes together. And so you do not want to overgeneralize one way or the other when it comes to stereotyping, because it can lead to bad policing, bad law enforcement investigation. You need to follow the facts and not do too much speculation about these things. Quite a bit of racial diversity in these perpetrators. Most are students who are attacking at colleges and universities. They have a history of mental illness, typically schizophrenia, mental issues like we see with the K through 12 shooters, suicidal, and with leaving manifestos. Again, that sounds political, but a lot of times these manifestos just show a lot of mental illness, a lot of disturbed thinking, and not rational political indoctrination, or like they've been radicalized by some group or some literature and with a coherent message or something like that. There's a lot of mental illness even in these individuals who are leaving manifestos, which again is not a common thing, people leaving manifestos behind. It's a once in a while thing. Also, house of worship shooters. Now, this is a biased type of shooter, shooting up synagogues, churches. It may be racial, it may be religious, could be, but this is not a common subset. Yes, we've seen high-profile cases in recent years, but it's not it's not like a really broad, common sort of subset. It's there, but again, we got to keep it in perspective, have some context here. And even some of these church cases are not bias motivated, or not racial, or religious hatreds or something like that. Very often these are family disputes, which I have an ex-wife who attends this church, and I hate her and I want to hurt her and other family members or something, and I know I can't go to her house. There's some court order that says that I can't go over to the house. Well, I could go to the church. I know she goes there every Sunday. And so you go shoot up the church because of grievances that you have with families or other individuals at the church. Again, not an ideological or political thing. It's more of a personal, there's an awful lot of personal grudge in a typical mass killing. That happens a lot more personal type stuff as opposed to political type stuff. And even in the case, of in these cases where you assume that they would maybe all be ideological, they're not all ideological. And of course, mental illness, even if there seems to be evidence of ideology, a lot of times it's really people who are mentally disturbed will pick up ideas. They get drawn to certain radical political ideas sometimes and kind of grab onto an idea here or grab onto an idea there. But really, it's the illness that's driving it, and they pick up stuff. But if you listen to them, it's not coherent. It's a lot of illogical, incoherent kind of gobbledygook, and they don't even hardly understand like they know what they're saying. So again, there's plenty of evidence that these cases, there's a tendency to over politicize these cases. Another typology: restaurant, bar, nightclub shooters, often no personal connection to the victims. At least they may not know them personally. Mostly white males, significant percentage with mental illness, most with a history of violence, some were veterans. That's a theme that I probably don't stress enough in my notes, that there's a significant minority of these shooters who have military experience, are veterans, and at least the common denominator here is a comfort level and a skill with guns. Because if you're going to be somebody who pulls off a mass killing, it's going to be somebody who knows how to use a gun and is comfortable and skilled with the use of a gun. And you're going to be more likely to be that kind of a person if you have a history of military service, of perhaps being a veteran, that sort of thing. So that is a risk factor, which, again, I don't think I stress it quite as much in the notes as I should. Retail shooters, often, so we're talking about stores, malls, that sort of place. Often no personal connection to victims, have a grievance against society. Again, usually these shooters do have a hatred, have a desire for revenge, but the groups that they have revenge for, it could be fellow workers, co-workers in the case of the workplace shootings. It can be people at school. I hate everybody at school. I hate everybody in society. It's usually that sort of thing, and not the ideological, which again is fairly small subtype. Workplace shooters, and just mentioned them, ex-employees usually, or more likely to be fired, or disciplined, often blue-collar jobs, males in their 40s, so they could be a little bit older shooters than some of these other shooters. Most have been fired or disciplined, creating a grudge, creating a hatred for the workplace, for your bosses, for your coworkers. And so it's all about revenge. You go to shoot up the workplace to get back at these people who supposedly have ruined your life and cause you to fail and make you want to commit suicide and escape and disappear from this life. Most of these guys obtain their guns legally. This is often the case with these mass killers, that the guns are obtained legally. It makes it difficult to stop them from getting guns because they don't have a criminal history very often, which would exclude them from being eligible to buy guns legally. And again, racial diversity there. Finally, government civic importance. So, again, it's a grievance. It's a retaliation. It's a problem with the government. So there could be some ideology there on anti-government ideology, hatred for government, and wanting retaliation or to sort of rise up against and in a violent way against a government. And again, racially diverse typology, type of shooter there. Now, how do we boil this all together? I'm beginning to run a little bit late on this segment. How do we put all these together? What are some commonalities? So these are things that you really often see with all these different types. Is male, a tendency to be young, almost always has a grievance, wanting payback, wanting revenge against somebody that they perceived has ruined their lives, has made their lives miserable, has caused them to be a failure. Uh, Either you have personal individuals who you develop a hatred for, or they can be more generalized than that, a symbolic group that you hate. But very often these killers feel like failures. They feel like their life is in ruins, is shambles. There could be a recent event like being terminated from your job that is like a trigger where you're like, that's it. It's like the final straw that sends you over the edge, and you want payback, and you want to die and go out in a blaze of glory and take all these awful people with you. So you feel like a failure, especially some recent event like being terminated from your job, like your girlfriend leaves you type of thing, and you blame others for your, and I got a typo there, I see, you blame others for your troubles, for your failures. It's society, it's my coworkers, it's the kids at school or the teachers at school. I hate them because they're making my life miserable. It's very often mental health issues of various sorts, suicidal, wanting to die and take a whole bunch of people with you. And as I said before, these folks are comfortable and skilled, very typically with their use of guns. And that helps explain why they are able to do as much damage as they can, is because they know how to use these guns, they shoot accurately, etc. Now, let's finish up. I'm running along here. Let's finish up this chapter with this predatory versus effective violence. This is a very fundamental division in violence studies, that you have basically the predatory types, that's the cold-blooded sort of killer, versus effective violence, which just means a hot-blooded sort of killer. One has a temper problem, one has an anger problem, one something makes him snap. This effective violence, the guy snaps over something, he loses it, he sees red, he attacks, and if he's a killer, if you could end up killing somebody. But for a very emotional, powerful, short-term explosion of feelings. These mass killers are not that type of killer, generally speaking. They're not explosive, lose their temper type guys. They're cold-blooded. They plan. They're not hot-blooded. They're not emotional. They certainly have deep negative emotions, resentment, hatred. They do have the anger, but it's more cold. They're gonna plan, take their time and plan carefully their revenge, and they're gonna hurt a lot of people by careful planning. So they quietly and coolly plan their murders. I've studied cases of people who've been planning their murders more than a year before they commit the crimes. So these are not impulsive, spontaneous killers. That's one thing that makes it hard to stop these guys, in the sense that they're cooler, they're running under the radar, and they're not hotheads who draw a lot of attention to themselves. So it's a little bit harder to identify these guys beforehand. And this coolness is indicative of psychopathy. What do we mean by psychopathy? Where you coolly treat others as objects for your disposal. Human beings don't have feelings and rights. They're not equal to you. They're just objects for you to use and throw away use for whatever purpose you have, and then dispose of them. So psychopathy, this coldness, this callousness, this inhumanity is very common among these killers. Violent individuals like these mass killers score high when they're studied on things like resentment, suspiciousness, paranoia. They think the world's out to get them. People are out to get them. Co-workers, fellow students are out to get them. They're, again, psychopathy, score high on being a psychopath. Callousness, cold, unfeeling towards other people. And then constantly blaming other people for all your failures, all your troubles, all your difficulties. It's never your fault. It's never anything that you need to work on. It's always everybody else's fault. So that makes you, when things go wrong in your life, you blame it on other people, and so you take it out on them. You commit violence against them because you blame them for all your problems. They are not impulsive. I've said this already. Not spontaneous killers. They're planners. Under the radar, making it more difficult to detect, to see it coming. So I really shortened that last part. Make sure on your own that you look at where the author is writing about the brain, about the limbic system, the amygdala, and also the frontal lobes, and that sort of neuroscientific approach to violence as well. Take a look at that.